Good evening, everybody. I'm Mark Houston. I'm an alcoholic. And I have been sober since October the 19th of 1982. And I am eternally grateful to God for that. Before I start tonight, I want to make an amends to those of you who were here last week. Nice thing about a lot of gifts in being sober for a while, but one of them is you got pals who care about you when you're making mistakes. And I got a call from my pal Dino, and some of you were kind enough to talk to him about some words that flowed out of my mouth that are inappropriate from the podium, and I want you to know I apologize for that. I fell asleep in that area last week, and so I hope it's in your heart to forgive me. It's an interesting thing about that. A couple things. A couple years ago, a pal of mine made a statement to me that I've done some work with, and one of them is, in a casual conversation, he said, Mark, human beings are like soybeans, and soybeans take on the flavor of whatever they're next to. And he didn't pay much attention to that statement, but that statement really caught my attention. And so after Dino had called me, I sat and looked at that. I do an evening review, and I realized for about 2 months I've been working with a lot of new people. Those of you that work with new people know that, they haven't been going to college studying English drama. And I guess I took on a little of the flavoring there, but at any rate, it was amazing to me. So I apologize for that, and that won't happen again tonight, because I have some power in my life today. I want to talk about second step tonight, and I want to talk about an experience I had today, which so Good evening, everybody. I'm Mark Houston. I'm an alcoholic. And I have been sober since October the 19th of 1982. And I am eternally grateful to God for that. Before I start tonight, I want to make an amends to those of you who were here last week. Nice thing about a lot of gifts in being sober for a while, but one of them is you got pals who care about you when you're making mistakes. And I got a call from my pal Dino, and some of you were kind enough to talk to him about some words that flowed out of my mouth that are inappropriate from the podium, and I want you to know I apologize for that. I fell asleep in that area last week, and so I hope it's in your heart to forgive me. It's an interesting thing about that. A couple things. A couple years ago, a pal of mine made a statement to me that I've done some work with, and one of them is, in a casual conversation, he said, Mark, human beings are like soybeans, and soybeans take on the flavor of whatever they're next to. And he didn't pay much attention to that statement, but that statement really caught my attention. And so after Dino had called me, I sat and looked at that. I do an evening review, and I realized for about 2 months I've been working with a lot of new people. Those of you that work with new people know that, they haven't been going to college studying English drama. And I guess I took on a little of the flavoring there, but at any rate, it was amazing to me, so I apologize for that, and that won't happen again tonight, because I have some power in my life today. I want to talk about second step tonight, and I want to talk about an experience I had today, which so correlates with the second step, and this has to do, again, with my first step experience. And my experience is that if I do not know what it means to be a real alcoholic, if I do not know what it means to be powerless, if I don't know what it means to have an unmanageable life, I will not do the rest of the work out of the big book. I absolutely will not do it, because I do not have a reason. And I had an experience today which illustrates this. Me and a friend of mine were sitting there talking with a man and a woman who are, I guess, what we would call chronic relapsers. And this woman has been around Alcoholics Anonymous for 23 years. At one time, she had 18 years. In a little over 18 years, she picked up a drink. And the longest she's had since then, which would be the last 5 or 6 years, is about 60 days. And we're sitting there talking. We're talking about the first step. And so I asked her a question. I said to her, after 18 years and you picked up a drink, in all the time since then that you have relapsed, do you think that you chose to do that? And she looked at me, and she didn't bat an eye, and she said, well, of course. And I said to her, where did you get the idea that you're involved in your decision to take a drink sober. She said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, and I opened the big book to page 24. And pages 23 through 43 are designed for you and I to come to some sense of an understanding experientially that sober, if I'm a real alcoholic, I've lost the power of choice. As a matter of fact, the book further on talks about something, and I said this to her. I said, it is very conceivable that early on when you came into AA, you may have had some choice, sober, as to whether you drank or did not drink. Because my book says that there are people who come to AA who can recover on a non-spiritual basis because they came to AA still having the power to choose whether they would drink or not drink. Now, I was not one of those people. But I said to her, I said, that could very well have been the case for you, but obviously it is not the case anymore. What's the point I'm trying to make? The point I'm trying to make is you have a person who's been around Alcoholics Anonymous for 23 years, and she has a belief system that sober, she has a choice as to whether she drinks or not drinks. See, if you don't understand this part, why will you go seek power? See, in those pages, I discovered my truth, and I had my experience, and here's my experience. Sober, at certain times, I will have no effective mental defense against the first drink. And the book spends 20 pages in there asking me to lay my experience alongside these 20 pages and come up with this. Is this you? And it goes on to describe to me why I've lost the power of choice and drink sober. And here's why. Because at certain times, in order for me to have choice, my will must be present. And my book says, and it's been my experience, that I get taken to a place sober where my willpower is not present. And I need my will to not drink. And the horrible dilemma for me is I don't know what the day looks like or the circumstances in which that may take place. Therefore, what I'm left with is what the book tells me in the 10th step. Mark, you stay sober one day at a time in Alcoholics Anonymous for one reason and one reason only, Mark. It's because you're in fit spiritual condition. And Mark, there is no other reason. And not only that, the book by then has told me exactly how to do that. I made this statement to you all last week. I work with the disciplines of 10 and 11 7 days a week. Every morning, I do upon awakening. I do all those prayers. I have some other prayers. Be quick to see where religious people are right. I have some religious practices that I employ. And I sit for 24 minutes in meditation. And then during the course of the day, I pick up the tools of the 10th and 11th step. What do I mean by that? Pause. When agitated or doubtful, ask God for the right thought, the right action. Watch, ask, turn, cease. Work with a new sixth sense. And this evening before I go to bed, I will do an evening review to see if I was awake today. And I will do another meditation. Why do I do that 7 days a week? I do that 7 days a week because of my experience with my first step. I do that 7 days a week because of my experience talking with these two people today who've been in and out. Between the two of them, they've been around AA 42 years. Neither one of them understood the main problem of the alcoholic centers in the mind rather than in the body. Which is why neither one of them had ever done much work at all with the steps, nothing with meditation. The gal hadn't written any inventory in 15 years. See, if I don't understand what's wrong with me in the first step, why am I going to do 2 through 12? That's the significance and the importance. That's why so much of the big book is devoted to me and my first step experience. 33 pages to answer a question. Mark, when you take a drink, do you lose control? Yes or no? 20 pages to look at the idea, sober, do you have a mind that takes you back to a drink, regardless of whether you want to go back to that drink or not go back to that drink? And that becomes my first step experience. And you see, now I have my need for power. And I want to talk about the second step from two viewpoints. The first viewpoint is for when I came to the second step, my first time through the steps. And then I want to briefly talk about how I come at the second step after being sober 18 years. When I came to the second step after having a first step experience, and I can't stress enough the word experience, I had an experience. And the reality of that experience was I was going to die an alcoholic death, and I was going to drink whether I wanted to or not if something didn't happen. And this book said to me that the only option I had, if this was me, was a spiritual experience. That was not good news to me at that time. And it's not good news to most alcoholics I've worked with. Now, let me tell you why it's not good news. Because I have a set of belief systems and ideas about God. And by then, I've been taken to the place that the only thing left is I got to have a spiritual experience with God, but that's not good news. Why? Because here was my idea. Right, wrong, or indifferent, it was my idea. There's this unseen, omnipotent God who knows everything that I have ever done, who knows my thoughts before I think them, who has given me 10 rules to live by, which I have been breaking my entire life. And coupled with that, though, he loves me and cares about me. But because I've been breaking those 10 rules, there's this place I get to experience, and it doesn't sound like some place you want to buy tickets to. And so I have this belief system, and you tell me I got to have an experience with God, and when you got a belief system about that kind of a God, that is not good news. And hence the incredible wisdom in the big book in We Agnostics, because they start right away and they say, look, Mark, half the original people were either atheists, didn't even believe in God, and the other half were agnostics. They're just like you, Mark, and they had this experience. Oh, well, okay. If they can do it, I'm willing to do that. See, because if you're like me and you had the experience I had in the first step, not knowing God was no longer an option. And debating about God was no longer an option. I tell people this, I'm Norwegian and alcoholic, but I am not stupid. Through a process of elimination, when there's nothing left for me to do but to seek God and to know God, I will go do that. But I have got to see that. I have got to eliminate all other options, human aid, all the other things. And then in We Agnostics, they do another great thing at this time is they can have me come face to face with the idea that I have two options, and simplicity is important for me. Here's what they are. Die the alcoholic death or live on a spiritual basis. Just two. Just two. No more. Nothing there about a wife and career and money and die an alcoholic death or live on a spiritual basis. Okay? That's it. Two. All right? Well, I've tried to do the one. Die the alcoholic death. I mean, this is my dilemma in my second step as well, by the way. See, I don't have the power to do either. I don't have the power to die an alcoholic death, as evidenced by the fact I'm standing here talking to you. And I don't have the power to self-will my spiritual life. So then I'm introduced to this concept that lack of power is my dilemma. And I understand at that point in time, my first time coming into the second step, I understand the truth of that. I look at my life and I see that lack of power is my dilemma. And this book talks about, well, I got to find the power by which I could live. And then it goes on to tell me, Mark, all the rest of this book is designed to show you where and how to find that power. See, if lack of power is your dilemma and you have a first step experience, then knowing where and how to find that power, I think, is very, very important. Because I ask people, I asked this woman today, 23 years in AA, she probably has enough big books to open a store. And I said to her, where and how are you going to find this power? She's got like 14 days again. I don't know. I think what a tragedy. We agnostics said the whole function of this book is to show you where and how to find this power. And later on they're going to tell me, and they're going to tell me how to find the power, which is somewhat paradoxical, because how I'm going to find the power is search fearlessly. And I'm not sure what they mean by that. And what was even more confusing was when they told me where I'm going to find it deep down within myself. That was very paradoxical to me, because somewhere in here, in these old belief systems about God, one in my head was somehow that God was out there. I'm not sure where I got that idea. It doesn't matter. I had it. So when the big book throws something at me, it says, Mark, in the final analysis, there's only one place that you're going to experience this power, deep down within yourself. I didn't understand what they meant. But I couldn't debate because I needed power. So now I'm still at the second step, but I still got this dilemma because I got this concept or this idea of this God that I have to have an experience with. And the big book said, look, here's the deal. And the word prejudice shows up many times in We Agnostics, and the man I work with made me use a dictionary because he realized right away I was so arrogant I thought I know what words meant. And what prejudice meant is preconceived thought or opinion. And we agnostics, they finally reach a place where they beg you and I to lay aside what we think we know about this God. That made sense to me, and I was very excited about doing that, by the way. Very excited. And then the second step does something else for me. It says, look, you get to come up with your own concept of a God that makes sense to you and that will work for you. A God that can be personal in your life. I kind of like that. That was neat. In AA, if you're new, you get to come up with your own concept of God. See how much we're loved? We're given a book. We get to invent God. Right? Why? Why do we need to do that? It doesn't have much to do with God. It has a lot to do with all these crazy belief systems you and I have. Real crazy belief systems that have been fostered on us. We've read. We take your pick. So I did. My first time through, I came up with a concept of a God that would work for me, a God who could be personal, a God that I could know. And that became my concept. And that became a God that I began to start praying to. And then there's a piece in there about the second step of, are you willing to believe there's a power greater than yourself? At that point in time, faced with my step one experience, absolutely. See? And they do something else in the second step that I love is they tell me when it comes to this God thing, Mark, you need to stop trying to define or comprehend God. I find it amusing when someone wants to get into a long discussion with me and they're going to define God to me. See? My book says, and it has been my experience, well, Thomas Merton said it best, when it comes to God, silence makes more sense than words. And to attach words to this thing about God. And so in we agnostics, I'm told, Mark, don't worry about defining God or don't worry about trying to comprehend God. Okay. And then there was something else that I needed to hook onto, and this again is if you're fairly new. The second step is not even so much about me believing in God. In the second step, I'm told what I have to have is a spiritual experience. Those are two different ideas. Belief in God and a spiritual experience are two completely different ideas. And again, the man who worked with me in We Agnostics got me real clear on the difference between an experience and belief. And the truth of it is, it's like moving from one side of the planet to another. And some of you will understand this when I say it. Some of us have come into AA and we have a belief about this incredible power. And somewhere along the line we have an experience with the power. There's a big difference, isn't there? There's a huge difference between the two. So I did have to make a decision about, am I willing to believe there's a power greater than myself? I was willing to bet my life on it. It wasn't anything I was going to sit and get any debate or dialogue about based on my first step experience. And then I get to another part in the second step where it says, okay, Mark, now you have a self-imposed crisis. It says self-imposed. That means it didn't come from out there. What is that self-imposed crisis? Lack of power. I'm going to die an alcoholic death, and I have an unmanageable life. And I imposed that on myself, self-imposed. Again, the book is very subtle about continually taking you and I and making us look at ourselves and making us get responsible for our life, which, if you're like me, I do not like to do. Because prior to coming to AA, I spent my life in column 1 and column 2. Then I don't have to be responsible. Does that make sense? Yeah, you guys can relate to that, can't you? Yeah. Column 1, Dad. Column 2, this is what he did, right? Column 1, Vietnam. Column 2, column 1, Republicans. Take your pick. Column 1, her. Column 2, I live my life there, And but it says, Mark, here's the deal. You're faced with a self-imposed crisis. And in the second step, you are going to have to make a choice. And that choice is that God is either going to be everything or God is going to be nothing in your life. And Mark, you do have to make a choice. So what is your choice going to be? I like to talk about those things. So I remember saying to my sponsor, well, what do you mean by everything? You see how we are? He said, well, what do you think everything means, Mark? I said, well, everything. He said, yeah. He said, you can't take some of your life and not put it under the umbrella of God and then reserve others. He said, it means you're going to take your alcohol, your alcoholism, your defects, every part of your life, every phase of your life, Mark, from this point on, you're going to place under that umbrella. And you're either going to do that or God's going to be nothing. You cannot give some of yourself to this power. So what's your choice going to be? And he told me something else. He said, Mark, this is the last choice that you're going to make going through these steps. He said you're going to make a choice in the second step. In the third step, you're going to make a decision. You're going to take action in 4 through 9. But it's the last choice you ever have to make through the steps. Well, I've got my first step experience. What am I going to say? God is nothing. So I made a choice. God is going to be everything. See? I'm going to have to turn to this God, this concept that I came up with in terms of my alcohol and my alcoholism. And he got very clear with me the difference between the two. Alcohol in the first half of the first step, the craving of the body, the obsession of the mind, and alcoholism in the second part of the first step, the unmanageability of my life, the I, self, me part of this thing. And then the book went on a little bit further and talks about, again, where and how I'm going to find the power. And it tells me that on page 55. Mark, in the last analysis, you're going to experience this great reality deep down within yourself. It goes on to say that's the only place you're going to have an experience with this power that you need to have. Now, I don't know about you, but, I've got to kind of work with some of that stuff. See, that didn't make sense to me. Because at that point in time, I'm pretty much acutely aware that I'm the problem. That I have a mind. By the way, my mind is not my friend. I got in a discussion about that today, and I suppose to a lot of people, their mind is their friend. My mind is not my friend. One time I go on a drunk, and I almost die, and I did die. What am I saying? I died for a minute and a half. Bumped me in. But I go to a hospital for 5 days, and I get out of this hospital, and my mind, my friend, I put my hand in the door, and my mind says, we need to go have a drink and celebrate. I don't have a friend in the world that would have ever asked me to do that. See? So my mind is not my friend in the second step, and by then I'm starting to understand I need a psychic change. I'm walking around with something. See, I heard a man say this one time. It summed me up. My mind thinks it can live without my body, as evidenced by the amount of alcohol that my mind convinced me to put in my body. See? And then I would have these dialogues. See, I'd be sober a few days, and my mind would convince me to take a drink. And I'd take a drink, and maybe a week later I'd come out of some blackout somewhere, and the very mind that convinced me to take a drink now is going to begin to lecture me. You dummy. Just a couple. You've been gone 6 days. That was not the plan. See? Now, what I don't know at that time is I have a body that breaks out in craving. So I got this inner conflict going on between the mind. The mind takes me to the drink. The body runs me for I don't know how many days. I come out of that blackout. My mind immediately starts beating me up. See? That's the stuff we got going on all the time. We wonder why we can't sit in meditation when we first get here, right? My mind is not my friend. I've got that kind of dialogue going on all the time, right? The very mind that takes me out now wants to sit and condemn me. See? We wonder, you sit there, you ever talk to an alcoholic, you're sitting there and you know they're not hearing a word. That's why. They got this stuff going on out there, right? So, at the end of we agnostics, I'm told over and over again in that chapter that I have a responsibility, and that responsibility is to seek. To seek a spiritual experience with this power. And I love the last two sentences on 57. And I don't much care for gender specific when it comes to God. The big book was written in that thing, but I'll just say, but God has come to all who've honestly sought God. When I draw near to God, God will disclose God's power to me. That's a promise. You can take that to the bank. Any one of you are new. The way I draw near to God is I continually go through the steps again. I want to take a couple minutes for those of you who've been sober for a while and tell you how I come at the second step, being sober 18 years, having gone through these steps many times. If there's one thing I've learned about spiritual living, it is that it demands that I have an open mind and an open heart every day. It absolutely demands it of me. Otherwise, I'm dealing with a thing called contempt prior to investigation. So when you go back to the steps again and you've got some time, what do you do now when you come up to the second step? Because what happens to me now when I come to the second step is this. I have had experiences with this power, this incredible loving power. As I stand before you right now, I'm experiencing conscious contact with this power. I've had mystical experiences with this power. I'm actually only 26. It turned my hair gray. I have had all of these things, see? And I come to the second step when I go back through the steps again, and I bring my knowledge of all this past experience back up to my second step. And here's the problem with all that knowledge of all these experiences. And those of you who've been sober for a while, you've had them. You know you have. You absolutely know God exists. You're like me. You can't explain it to anybody. It's annoying. But so you come to the second step again, and it's like, if there's not more of God to know past here, then He's not infinite. So I have to come to the second step from this place. Am I willing to believe there's this power that I can experience more of past here? Past this block of knowledge, past these old experiences that I've had, past these laurels, this living on knowledge. Is there more past here? Is there much more of God that I know nothing about? See? And that's the approach that I take as I go back through the steps now. Now back to this thing of self-imposed crisis, if you've got time. My self-imposed crisis today is not lack of power. My self-imposed crisis today, with time in this program, time with spiritual living, knowing God, my self-imposed crisis is everything from spiritual pride to living off the memories of old experiences. That's my self-imposed crisis today. So am I willing once again to choose that God's going to be everything, that there's this incredible God that can take me far past where I am right now, into dimensions I know nothing about, dimensions of joy and wonder and love, the ability to be of service, to be an agent. Wow. Sure, why not? See, choice is responsibility. If you're going to choose, are you going to go for that? Is there more past here? See? I think this happens to a lot of us, and I'll talk about it around the second step, but this idea of there's only one path to God, this dogma that people get into, these disagreements, if you will. There's a story that summed this all up. It's back to, say, concepts of God. If we took a piece of paper and sent it around to everybody and we asked everyone in this room to write down your concept of God, I can assure you there would be a lot of differences. And some people get in large debates about their God, and And I was reading a book one time, and again, stories. I love stories, and this story just stripped me of this thing, because I fell into that. The religion I practice, for example, is Catholicism. But the story is that you and I have to go up to a summit. And this summit is very steep, and the only way we can get to this summit is to take a donkey. So every one of us in this room, we all get on a donkey, but these donkeys all look different. And we all take a trip. And on the way up, we are continually debating and arguing with each other about my donkey's better than your donkey. And we miss the whole view, but when we get to the top of the summit, we all get off our donkeys, the view's the same. And what's the moral of the story? The moral of the story is the focus should never be the donkey, it should be the view. See? I don't care what donkey we ride. What difference does it make? It doesn't make any difference. But I used to spend a bunch of time thinking it had to be my donkey. AA, the big book in the wisdom, says, look, we don't have a monopoly on this. In the years I've been around AA, if you've been around, there's a movement afoot, a thing called back to basics. A lot of people have a lot of opinions. I don't care what donkey an alcoholic experiences. Just give him the view. You see, I don't care. There's some of us, like myself, when I work with someone, we start in the title page, we go through it, somewhat arduous, right? That's the donkey I ride. Why? Because the man who carried the message to me, that's the donkey he showed me. I've had a lot of experience with it, so that's the donkey I show others. Does that mean there's anything wrong with your donkey? I don't think so. So, for whatever it's worth, that's the donkey story. For those of you that think you have the only donkey in town. So, that's how I come at the second step at 18 years. Third step. We come up through the ABCs. I'm an alcoholic, cannot manage my own life. Is that my truth? Am I convinced of that? Yeah. Experientially, not intellectually. Experientially, down here. Probably no human power could relieve me of my alcoholism. Well, that is my experience. One of the exercises I like to give people is make a list of the forms of human power that you have attempted to work with to rid you of your alcoholism, drunk or sober. Well, what do you mean? A great alcoholic question, right? Well, let's see. Like, you ever tried to get sober for her? Yeah. Sober, have you ever tried to will your defects away for her? Yeah. Okay. Did that work? Nope. Well, then how about him? And how about the job? And the list goes on and on and on and on. Because you've got to be convinced and you've got to experience that no human power is going to keep you away from a drink, and no human power is going to help you with the unmanageability of your life. And the only way I know how to do that is to take a list, take a look at all the forms of human power that we've tried. Some people are looking to go in the penitentiary if they drink again. Did that stop them? Nope. It's another form of human power. Children is a form of human power, isn't it? The love that a parent has for a child. Does that keep you from drinking? No. So I make this list, and I'm left with no human power is going to keep me from taking a drink. Why do I keep stressing this? Because if you don't get stripped of all that, why are you going to go seek an experience with God? You're not. You're absolutely not. If you think anything human is ever going to keep you sober and give you peace of mind, why will you go seek God? I didn't. I ran it as hard as I could on my will for as long as I could. Ran into a massive tree called alcoholism. And that brought about surrender. See? God could and would if he were sought. God can and will if I seek him. My responsibility is to seek him. Now I come up to my third step. And I did not know this for the longest time, but before I make my third step decision, there is a requirement that I absolutely must meet before I make this decision. And I want to read some of this to you in first person, and the reason is, I'm so selfish that when the big book uses the word we, I think they're talking about you. And a man gave me a simple tool. He said, read this in first person and see if it fits. But there's a requirement before I make my third step decision, and that requirement is, am I convinced that my life run on my self-will can hardly be a success, drunk or sober? Well, I don't know. I don't know. And the book's going to spend giving me about a page of what this looks like when I am running my life on my self-will. Buddy, even though I have good motives. What do they mean by that? I try to live by self-propulsion. I am like an actor. I want to run the whole show. I'm forever trying to arrange the lights, the ballet, AA, all the people in my life in my own way. If my arrangements would only stay put, if only all these people, husbands and wives and employers and AA and my sponsor, and if all these people would do as I... Now, this is a delusional thought. If all these people would do as I wish, the show would be great. Go to someone in your life and tell them that. You're going to get a little disagreement. Look at this next sentence. And we believe this. Everybody, including me, will be pleased. And I believe that life would be wonderful, meaning if all my arrangements stay put, right? And now it talks about the toolkit of self-will. In trying to make these arrangements, I can be very virtuous. I can be very kind, considerate, patient, generous. I can even be modest and self-sacrificing. That's the tools of self-will, right? On the other hand, I can also be mean, egotistical, selfish, and dishonest. I'm going to have varied traits. That's my toolkit of self-will. Great toolkit, right? Kindness is in there. Did you catch that? See, when you've been sober for a while, like some of us, we just switch tools. See, I don't use dishonesty anymore. I use kindness. See? And I don't use selfish anymore. I'll use generous. It's still self-will, right? And then it goes on to say, well, here's what happens. My show didn't come off very well. And I begin to think life doesn't treat me right, so here's what I do. I'm going to exert myself more. I'm going to evaluate this situation, see what I need to get my way, and I'm either going to be demanding or gracious however I scan the horizon. Honey, I was wrong. I'm real sorry. Send flowers, chalk, whatever.
Still, this play doesn't suit me. See? Admitting I may be somewhat at fault, tiny little bit, I'm sure other people are much more to blame. See? Can't you just feel this? See? And what I do then is I become angry, indignant, and self-pitying. What is my basic trouble? Here it is. Now, the book is doing something very interesting. Have you noticed they're not talking about drinking? See? I've done all this stuff with step 1. Alcohol is not being mentioned in here at all. What is my basic trouble? Am I not a self-seeker even when trying to be kind? And here the sentence sums me up. I'm a victim of the delusion that I will be satisfied and happy if I only manage well. See, I know better than God who's supposed to be in my life and where I'm supposed to live, where I'm supposed to work, how long Mom and Dad are supposed to live. I mean, the list is endless. And I actually believe that. See? Now, I went back into my experience. Some of you may consider doing this. I have had times when my arrangements were all there. I call it my ducks were in a row. And you know what? I still got drunk. That is a delusion. See? Even when my arrangements, I'll never forget this. At 5 years sober, I came into AA with a duffel bag. 5 years sober, I bought a $100,000 home, 2 cars in the garage, little wifey Pooh, she had 2 children, a couple dogs, mountain property, about $5,000 worth of camping equipment I used one time. We almost killed each other. About $15,000 worth of new furniture, big 55-gallon aquarium. And I'm sitting there home alone, supposedly in my castle, and I realize something. I am a prisoner of war. I couldn't have missed 1 hour of work, or I would have been into bankruptcy. So, I mean, I got all these ducks in a row, right? I'm with this woman I want to be with. I got, you know, the great American dream. And I'm sitting there as miserable as I've ever been in my life. See? So I see that this is me. I suffer from this delusion that I'll be happy and satisfied if I manage well, right? And I begin to see the truth of this. And then it goes on to talk about, here's the other thing that happens, Mark, in the middle of all this. Is it not evident to all the rest of the people in your life, these are the things you want? See, like we think we're getting away with this, right? And do not your actions make these people wish to retaliate? They get very angry. See, it's like we all want to send people. Here's what we do. We have a script for everybody and everything in our life. We never send it to anybody. See, it's like, can't they read my mind? See? And then the book goes on and it says, Mark, you are self-centered. Alcohol is not being mentioned at this point in time. See? I am self-centered. And give me some examples. Mark, whatever your protestations, Mark, aren't you just concerned with yourself, your resentments, and your self-pity? See, and this doesn't feel good as you're experiencing this. See? Because of the work done in 1 and 2, you're having to have a sense that they're hitting some home runs here. See? And then they go into this. Selfishness, self-centeredness. That, Mark, is the root of your troubles. Alcohol is not being mentioned at all. See? Alcohol is not being mentioned. See, I don't know how we became this way, but early on in life, right up till I got sober, and for quite a few years in sobriety, all I was centered on Mark. I was like an ingrown hair. And when you're centered on yourself, you are selfish. Everything is about you. See? And it says that, Mark, is the root of your troubles. Now, here's something else I did not understand for the longest time. When you are centered on yourself, you do not go through life making choices. You go through life being driven, which is what our big book says. Driven by what? Here's what drives you and I through life. And these are cute things. 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, and self-pity. See? That's my toolkit. That's what fires my engine every morning. Limo comes up, picks me up, I get in, walk out. Driver turns around and says, "Hi, Mark, my name's Fear, and I will be driving you all day today." I take it into work. I take it with all my employees, all my friends, everywhere. See? Next day, another driver comes up. I go out, get in the stretch limo. He turns around and says, "Hi, Mark, I'm self-seeking, and I'm driving you around today." The next day, it's self-pity, and the next day, self-delusion. And that's how I go through life. And I sit here and lie to everyone, and I tell you all that I'm involved in making choices with my life. It's not true. Drunk or sober. I lived in this delusion that sober, I was making choices in my life, till one day a man challenged me, said, just take the last year, tell me about some of these choices you made. And I told him, he looked at me, he said, Mark, a moron would have made better choices than that. He was trying to make a point. You're not making choices, Mark, when you're in self-will. You're being driven. Choice has nothing to do with it. Whoa, was that an eye-opener? There's nothing worse than being sober thinking you're making choices when you're being driven instead. See? And then this describes to me what happened. You know how we're going to write inventory? We're going to write a 4-column inventory, right? Resentment. And this paragraph describes this whole inventory, and it starts out with my 4th column. Where am I at fault? It says, Mark, when you're driven by fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, self-pity, you're going to step on the toes of your fellows, column 1. They're going to retaliate, column 2. Sometimes they hurt you, column 3. Seemingly without provocation. I didn't do anything. But Mark, you will always find, it says, you will find at some time in your past, Mark, you made a decision based on self, which later placed you in a position to be hurt. So Mark, here's the bad news. Your troubles are of your own making. All of your troubles, Mark, are of your own making. Alcohol is not mentioned once. Now I remember looking at this man, I said, all my troubles? Yeah. Your financial, your physical, your career, I said, well, I don't know if I like that. And he made a statement which is absolutely the truth of my life today. And he said, Mark, that sentence is the greatest statement of hope in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I said, what are you talking about? He said, here's what I'm talking about, Mark. If there is any part of your life that is not of your own making, that means something outside you has got to change in order for you to be at peace. He said, thank God, Mark, nothing outside of you ever has to change. Ever. And I begin to understand the truth of this. The longer I've been sober, the more work I do with inventory, that all my troubles are of my own making. See, thank God my troubles are of my own making today. And it goes on to talk about these troubles. They arise out of me. We're like volcanoes of trouble, right? And I'm an extreme example of self-will run riot, though I don't think so, which means I'm delusional. See? For any of you who don't think you fit this, if you have remaining friends or family members, go ask them what they think about this. See? Now, the next sentence, seldom discussed in Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm going to challenge maybe some of you to talk about this more. The next sentence says, above everything, Mark, you must be rid of this selfishness. You must, or it will kill you. I wonder why we don't talk about these. These sentences are pretty important. I'm going to die. I've been around almost over 18 years. We do not talk about these 2 sentences very much. I think we need to talk about them more. Here's my connection between selfishness and dying. When I am selfish, trying to arrange the world and all of its people and AA and everything else, and the show doesn't go the way I want, I become angry, indignant, full of self-pity. I begin to manifest within me what's called the unmanageability of my life. I get diseased. I get restless, irritable, and discontent. And my mind, if that goes on long enough, my mind, my friend, will remind me of something that will make that go away, and that's called a little drink of liquor, and I'm going to take that drink and activate a phenomenon called craving, and I'm going to drink myself to death. So the problem has never been step 1. This is my problem. My selfishness. You follow me? I did not understand that for years in Alcoholics Anonymous. This is my problem. My problem isn't step 1, and they tell this later on. Step 1, Mark, is a symptom of your problem. Your problem, Mark, is you are selfish and self-centered. Period, end of statement. That's what has to go. And the next sentence is both good news and bad news. The bad news is you and I's name is not in the next sentence. The good news is God makes that possible. See, there's nothing worse than coming to the 3rd step and not knowing why you need God. See, I need God because the very thing that's going to kill me, that makes me miserable, that robs me of peace, that makes me restless or discontent, I can do nothing about. Because your self-will can't defeat your self-will. Does that make sense? You know, your self-will cannot defeat your self-will. That is my experience. It's like working on defects. The best I do with those is embellish them. I need God to remove them from me. See? You give me a project of working on defects and watch what I do with that stuff. And it goes on to say, in this next sentence I missed for years, there often seems no way of, now pay attention to these 4 words, entirely getting rid of self without God's aid. This book is promising me that if I will keep doing this, I can get taken to a place where self can completely die. Now, those of you who read other spiritual books, all of them that I read, all point to the same thing. I think the Carpenter said, you got to die to be reborn. Buddha says, the cause of all suffering is desire. The Bhagavad Gita, all of them say the same thing. You must die the death of self. Our big book says that as well. With God's help, I can be entirely rid of self. Wouldn't that be sweet? See? Wouldn't that be sweet? It's that statement. We've all made it. I can't stand myself anymore. See, when you and I make that statement implies, and we've all made it, we think there's 2 of us. There's not. I can't stand myself. And that's the truth. Myself is what dies in 4 through 9 and working with the disciplines of 10 and 11. Self, ego, self-will. That's what dies. See? You must get rid of this idea there's 2 of you here. There's not. There's just one. See? I can't live with myself. Boy, that's true too, see? But we can entirely get rid of self with this incredible program, with these incredible steps. See, for those of you who've maybe gone through the steps one time, why would you not do this again? See? People say, well, why do you do so much work with the steps and the disciplines? For the effect produced. Same reason I drank. I drank for the effect produced, right? Why would I sit 2 times a day in meditation with that which created me and loves me and sustains me and gives me life? For the effect produced. See? Why would I make amends? Why would I start out tonight making amends to you all? Sincerely making amends. For the effect produced. You follow me? But I got to understand why I have to have God's help as I come into this 3rd step. It talks about I have moral and philosophical convictions below, but I cannot live up to them. We've all had that. You want to be a good husband or a good wife or a good member of AA or a good employee, and everywhere you look, you're not doing too well. Why? Because with self intact, practicing moral and philosophical convictions, those 2 things don't fit in the same box. When you're going through life being driven by fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, self-pity, that is your major concern, not moral and philosophical convictions. See? I've got to die the death of self, entirely get rid of self. That happens in 4 through 9. Selfishness, self-centeredness is what self is all about. And it says, I cannot reduce my self-centeredness by wishing or trying on my power. Here I'm back to this power thing again. I have to have God's help. See? It's not an option. See? I have to have God's help. And experientially, I know that this becomes my truth. And now it says, this is how I'm going to get God's help and why I need it. First of all, I got to quit playing God. That's how I'm going to get God's help. I'm going to quit playing God. And I had to sit with my sponsor, and I had to work with this for a while. The only way I'm going to get God's help is I'm going to quit playing God. Well, first of all, you've got to be awake enough to realize how much you've gone through life playing God. I know better than God who my parents were supposed to have been, where I was supposed to have been raised, the schools I was supposed to have gone. I mean, the list was on and on and on about how Mark played God. I was supposed to have been a better athlete, and I was too small when I was growing. I was 5'6", and I got out of high school, and then I grew. And why couldn't it have happened? And it's just incredible stuff, And why do I have to become an alcoholic? And she left, and then she stayed. It's just over and over. That's that old thing of I don't know what's worse, getting what you want or what you don't want. So I got to quit playing God. You know, and those of you who've been sober, we've all had this experience. We love to play God in AA, right? Only AA would you know. I have to quit playing God. And then it tells me why I have to quit playing God. Me playing God doesn't work. When I play God at my very best, I create confusion, see, instead of harmony. Now, I'm going to make my third step decision. Based on all the experiences I've had now with the first and second step is, I'm going to decide that hereafter in this drama called life, God's going to be my director. So if God's the director, then I'm going to be the actor. God's the principal, I am the agent. God's the father, I am his child. Talks about this as the keystone. And I look up those words. Powerful words. I think it's important if you're going to make a third step decision. And by the way, my experience is the prayer is not the decision. The prayer is an affirmation of the decision, which is at the bottom of page 62. And here's what this decision is, based on all the work I've done up to this point, is that from this point on, this power, my concept of God, is going to direct my life. And that means I'm going to be the actor. And you look at the idea of a director, right? What's a director do if I'm the actor? I'm given a script. I'm told, do this, go here, do here. Based on the condition that my life has been in when I came here and at times sober, I need that. See? I do not do very well when I'm directing me in my own movie. So I get to have a director, and I get to be the actor. And then I get to have a principal, and I get to be the agent. And you look up those words. Agent. I get to be empowered by God. I get to be an agent of and for God. An agent of my principal. You look up the word principal. One in first rank, authority, one who delegates. I remember looking at the man who took me through this work and saying, I don't know if I want that responsibility. He said, do you have a choice? Die the alcoholic. I said, okay, never mind. Forget I said that. See, he always kept... I got sober in 82 in Denver, and we used to do, for about 3 years back then, we were doing 12 steps. We had an inner group, and they would call, groups would take calls, and guys I went and did 12 steps with always carried alcohol with them. And he always kept alcohol there, and he did it mostly to make a point, but, anywhere in these first 3 steps where I'd do some bulking or, he would grab that bottle of Jack, and he'd slam it down, and he'd say, you tell me. Be an agent of God, drink whiskey. Oh, okay. I forgot. I'm sorry, I forgot. See, 2 through 12 aren't about 2 through 12. They're about 1. And then they're about this selfishness that's got to die. See, I need to stay hooked into me and that whiskey. See? Well, I don't know if I'm right inventory. Drink, right inventory. Oh, I lost it. Excuse me. Lost it. I'll be done in 4 days. Not a problem. Got a protege coming. Well, I don't want to make these amends. Boom. Jack Daniels, amends. Oh, I lost it. Pardon me. I'll pay all the money back. Not a problem. I'll go see them all. Whatever I got to do. See? You stay hooked to that first step experience. And then you get what's called the third step prayers. When you and I take this position, all sorts of remarkable things follow. I like remarkable things. I get a new employer. This next sentence has been very important in my recovery. Being all-powerful, God's going to provide everything I need. The word want is not there. If, that's a condition. I keep close to Him, that means be His child. Trust God. Be His child. And perform His work well. Be His actor and be His agent. Everywhere. All of the time. They're conditions. And here's the third step promises. If I'm established in this footing, what happens to me? The same guy who is selfish, self-centered, consumed with himself will become less and less interested in himself and his little plans and designs. I didn't like the use of that word in there about my plans. Little. See, and that's my truth. Any plans I would have had for my life were so little compared to the plans that which created me had. It goes on to say that more and more I get interested in seeing what I can give back to life. I will feel new power flow into me. I will enjoy peace of mind. I will discover I can face life successfully. I will become conscious of God's presence. Not a belief. Conscious of the presence of God. An absolute knowing there's God. Every cell of your being. You know it beyond a shadow of a doubt. Because of that, I lose my fear of today, tomorrow, the hereafter. The past is not mentioned. I am reborn. Born, I begin to experience the fact that I'm a spiritual being willing to go through the death of ego, false self. And now we say this incredible third step prayer, which is an affirmation of our decision. Think about what we're saying to that which created us, to God. God, I offer myself to Thee to build with me, and You do with me as You want. Why would we say that? Because we didn't do a very good job. That's why. See? We did not do a very good job. Relieve me of the bondage of self, my problem, my selfishness, that I can do nothing about, so I can better do Your will. Take away my difficulties, God, so that victory over those difficulties can bear witness. That's all we do in AA. All I'm doing this month is bearing witness to you of God's power, God's love, and God's way of life. That's all I do. Go around bearing witness. God's love, God's power, God's way of life. May I do Thy will always. And then they really tricked us, because they tell us to think well after we've done this. They didn't tell us that on the front end, see? You get done doing this, what you've done is really told the universe something, and then it says, well, now we want you to think well before taking this step. They tell us that at the end of the step. See? Wonder why. Making sure we're ready. To do what? To do 4 through 9. Making sure you're ready. That you can at last abandon yourself utterly to God. The word abandon means give up completely. Jump off into an abyss. Why would I do that? Well, I got whiskey back here and abyss here. What difference does it make? I'm jumping. I've tried that. 20 years I tried that. That's right here. Got an abyss. What have I got to lose? Absolutely nothing. I'm going to abandon myself. Pop, we're jumping down off that thing, right? And it gives us some instructions on this. It says it's a spiritual step. Do it with an understanding person. Better to meet God alone if somebody might misunderstand. The wording is optional as long as I express this idea, but then I need to voice this out loud. And then, like the book always does, you get done with this work, and I kept waiting to find a place in here. Mark, you've done a good work. Take a month off. I've never found it. Because it goes on to say that this is only a beginning. Powerful stuff in here. Powerful, powerful stuff. Next week we'll... I've never had a problem come up with inventory, so I'm going to write some inventory next week, and I'm going to read it to you and show you how I write inventory. Okay? And I'll probably write a 4-column resentment inventory, maybe write a piece on fear, talk about that next week, and we'll just continue through the journey. Thank you all very much. God bless you.